All right, welcome. Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating economic puzzle. It's a story about what happens when a country builds the perfect solution to its biggest problem, only for that solution to crash head-on into a massive global crisis. This is the story of Nigeria's refinery paradox. And really, this is the question at the heart of it all. Nigeria spent decades dreaming at this moment of finally being able to fix its broken energy system. But what nobody saw coming was a war in the Middle East that would turn what should have been a moment of triumph into a real test of survival for millions of people. To get a sense of the scale here, let's start with this number, 650,000. That's how many barrels of oil the brand new Dangote Refinery can process every single day. We're not just talking about a big factory. This thing is the largest on the entire African continent. It's an industrial giant built to solve a very specific and very painful national problem. And that problem was this crazy paradox Nigeria had been living with for decades. It's one of Africa's biggest oil producers, right? But it couldn't refine its own fuel, so it had to import gasoline to keep its own cars and businesses running. It was a cycle that just made no sense. The Dangote Refinery, well, that was the new hope, the game changer that was finally supposed to flip that script. And by February of 2026, it looked like the dream had finally come true. The refinery was running at full tilt, and the government even suspended fuel import licenses. For the first time in a generation, Nigeria was making enough fuel to supply itself. You can just imagine the sense of national pride and economic relief. But just as the country was celebrating this new era, this new self-sufficiency, a geopolitical crisis exploded. Conflict in the Middle East sent these massive shockwaves through global energy markets, and those shockwaves were heading straight for Nigeria. The impact was immediate, and it was brutal. In just over 3 weeks between late February and mid-March, the price of petrol for an ordinary Nigerian shot up by a staggering 39.5%. Just think about that. Imagine your cost to get to work to power your generator jumping by almost half, practically overnight. And this slide really puts it into perspective. I mean, look, prices went up everywhere. That's what happens in a global crisis. But the scale of the jump is what's just mind-blowing. You see the US at about 16%, Germany around 15%, and then there's Nigeria at nearly 40%. That surge was the highest in all of Africa and the second highest recorded in the entire world. It was a total outlier. Which brings us right back to the paradox. The refinery, the big solution, it was working perfectly. Nigeria was making its own fuel. So why on earth did Nigerians get hit with one of the worst price shocks on the planet? It just doesn't add up, right? Well, to figure it out, we have to look under the hood. And here it is. This is the refinery's Achilles heel, where it was getting its crude oil from. See, despite having a deal to get local crude paid for in local currency, a massive 65% of the oil it was refining had to be bought on the international market, in US dollars. Only about a third of its supply was actually coming from that domestic deal. Let's break that down, because the numbers are pretty wild. To run at full capacity, the refinery needed about 13 to 15 big tanker cargoes of crude oil every single month, but the state oil company was only delivering 5. That huge shortfall forced the refinery to go shopping on the volatile global market, where it had to pay huge premiums, sometimes up to $18 extra per barrel. And of course, that extra cost got passed directly down to you at the pump. And this quote from an analyst just nails it. The refinery didn't create some separate, independent Nigerian fuel market. It just plugged a world-class Nigerian machine into the very turbulent, very unpredictable global market. So when the world market panicked, that panic flowed straight into the gas stations in Lagos and Abuja. The refinery became a price taker, not a price maker. Okay, so given those painful price hikes, it's pretty easy to just conclude that the whole project was a massive failure, right? That it failed its first big test. But honestly, the story is way more complicated than that. Because here's the hidden success story. For the first time anyone can remember, during a major fuel crisis in Nigeria, there were no lines. No panic buying, no rationing, no waiting for days at a petrol station. The refinery guaranteed that the fuel was physically there. And in Nigeria's history, that is a truly monumental achievement. And it gets even more amazing. This number, 214,000, that's how many barrels of refined fuel Nigeria exported per day in March. In the middle of a global crisis, Nigeria wasn't just supplying itself. It had become a key supplier to its neighbors, shipping fuel across West Africa. So let's be super clear on this. The refinery delivered on some huge promises. It kept the lights on, kept the cars moving, and prevented the usual chaos of scarcity. It turned Nigeria into a regional energy powerhouse. And, this is important, when global prices dipped a little, the refinery did pass those savings along. This wasn't a story of price gouging, it was a story of price transmission. So here's the real takeaway. The refinery didn't end Nigeria's vulnerability to energy crises. It just completely changed what that vulnerability looks like. The old problem was scarcity, the physical lack of fuel that led to those infamous queues. The new problem is price. The financial shock of the global market hitting people's wallets was zero buffer. So why were people so exposed to that shock? Well, it's because the industrial hardware, the refinery itself, was built without the policy software to go with it. That deal for cheap local crude wasn't delivering. Nigeria doesn't have a strategic petroleum reserve to cushion the blow of a price spike. The whole domestic supply chain just wasn't ready to support this world-class machine. And that's really the bottom line here. The Dangote Refinery is an undeniable industrial triumph. It's an incredible piece of engineering. It works. It's secured the nation's fuel supply. But the policies needed to protect everyday people from the ups and downs of the world market, they just haven't caught up yet. And that leaves us with this final, crucial question for the future. Nigeria has solved the problem of supply, but the next and maybe even harder challenge is solving the problem of price. Building that policy shield to protect ordinary Nigerians from the global market, that's the next chapter in this incredible story. And it's a chapter that's still waiting to be written.